So, hands and stuff. In order to talk about hand anatomy, we need, as usually, a bone simplification, right? So, let's draw some simple bones. So, we have the bone of the shoulder, which you probably know, but we'll repeat this part just in case. So this is the shoulder bone. It has a bulge here, which can be imagined as a square shape, so a shape like this, right, which is connected to a dome, to a half of a sphere, half sphere, right? We also have this little bulge, which have this deltoid shape to it, and well, this is the part where deltoid attaches, so it makes sense. Now, when we go lower, we have a part that looks mostly like some sort of rotational device. So a cylinder, half a cone, and then we have these parts that stick out. So if we have a look at a person's arm, right, and we look at their elbow, we'll have the big sturdy bone of the elbow itself down below, and then we'll have these little bony protrusions on the side, which are very painful to hit, right? So those are here. The reason the outer part is painful to hit is because there's a nerve here which gets stuck when we hit it. So yeah, now we will be drawing this hand in the position where the palm looks upwards. So this is the thumb, so we will now know that this is the left arm. The palm looks upwards, faces upwards, and the torso is here, right? And now we can go to the bones. So first we have the bone that forms the elbow. It can be imagined like a spoon that has this part here, and then it becomes really thin and goes towards the arm. Now, what is important to know is that this part attaches here, obviously, like this is a very simple robot design. We have a cylindrical shape and then a shape that envelops it, and this way rotation can be done. Also we have the biomechanical part here, and it goes down and it faces the pinky finger, so it ends where the pinky finger ends. And now we have the second bone of the arm. It attaches on the outer side and it goes towards the big finger, towards the thumb. What is interesting about those two bones is their shape contrast, because this bone, which is called radius. Again, you probably know all this, but I'll cover it quickly and we'll go to the muscles, right? So we have the radius on the outside, and it starts really thin, and then it becomes kind of huge and forms a shape like this. Again, I'm simplifying the shapes. And then we have the bone called ulna. I don't know how it's pronounced. I don't think it's a possible sound, but anyway. And that bone forms the elbow, and obviously because it's rotating and stuff, it's really thick, but its end point, the parts that touch the carpal bones, it's pretty thin. Why are those bones important? Well, you probably know that if I wanted to make this stamp be here, basically if I wanted to rotate the palm, I'd need to rotate the palm, right? And to do that, I need to take the radius bone and kinda make it face like this, right? So it intersects, it crosses the ulna bone or ulna or whatever, and makes this cross shape. And now the thumb no longer points to the left side, it points to the right side, and the palm points down, right? And everything about this determines the muscle positions, right? Because the pronator muscle, the supinator muscle that does the supination, the brachioradialis, etc., they're all attached to different parts of these bones, and of course we need to kinda keep in mind the pronation and supination. Yeah. So now let's continue to actually the upper part, because we need to properly insert the shoulder bone into the skeleton. So again, you probably know this, but we need wait a second. So in order to make the shoulder insertion point, we need both clavicle and scapula, right? If we take our scapular bone, it will have this flat part, right, and this ridge on its end, and this ridge ends in this thing called acromion, and this part of the scapula has the socket where our round part of the shoulder bone inserts, right? And this acromion actually connects to the end of the clavicle. So we have like this bony triangle. This is the view from up, from above. So we have the acromion here, and then we have clavicle, and this here is neck and stuff. So let's show the connection point. We have acromion facing here and being connected to the clavicle, and doing its stuff. which is kind of important because that part can actually be seen on a person. Bones are important in general because bones are the muscle attachment points. So, for example, here we have our deltoid muscle that consists of the front part and middle part, and while the front part attached to the clavicle, the middle part, this one, is attached to the connection point, to the where acromion connects to the clavicle. And actually, this part where the bone is can be easily found on a person, so the bone is very close to the surface. And this part where the shoulder bone starts actually also can be found because you probably know that when muscle attached to something, this is the part where it becomes the tissue that's more like a tendon, and it's really thin, and the muscle is only thick in between the attachment points, so that it could be it could do its stretching and expanding and stuff, right? So this is the part where the deltoid muscle is thin, so we can actually kind of see, especially if the person in question is thin, we can see a bulge here, which is, well, the bone. Now, on the part behind, again, you probably know, it's all very well known basic stuff, but we have the triceps here, which is, well, it's called triceps and it has 3 muscles. There are 2 main shapes visible, and from this point of view we will only see one. Now, the part that everyone loves, the bicep muscle, that is doing some flexing, like it's doing some flexing right now because we're drawing the hand in bent position. So we're having this distal biceps tendon that is attached sideways, and then it forms the 2 heads of the bicep. And it's important to know the general shape. Let's make a section here, so it looks like here, like this, and it can be described as having front face, upper face, and lower face, and should be shaded as such. Between the bicep and the tricep, we have the shoulder muscle brachialis, forming this middle shape. So we have shapes like this. Now, because we have our bicep in the active state, I'm drawing the tricep shape weaker because those are antagonist muscles and the tricep isn't doing much right now. It is important to remember when drawing the position of every antagonist muscle group so that we could make the shape softer when we're drawing the muscle that is being relaxed. Now, what I was adding right now, this long thin shape, is actually the part where the tricep attaches. It faces towards the elbow, although basically if we look at the hand from behind, so this here is deltoid, right? And we have this bulge here if our hand is taken care of, if it's a strong hand. And this is a tricep, right? Like it looks like it has two heads, despite having three. It's a bit asymmetrical. It has the longer head here and the shorter one, and then it becomes like this. So we have, and the shape of the arm itself looks like this, right? The middle part, then we have these tendons, and kinda like this, right? Of course, if we're drawing it from behind, we also have a little bit of biceps sticking out here, being seen. And actually this part is the aforementioned this part of the shoulder bone. Not the radius, but the part of the shoulder bone that is currently hidden by it. So we will have the elbow bone. So we discussed the bone of the ulna, right? And from below it has like this shape here, and you remember that it's attached to the shoulder bone, right? So it's doing rotation here. Let's draw a simple arm in order to understand what's going on. And because the triceps needs a point of attention, it goes here, right? These tendons go here, and we get a very simple construction, which results in, when we are looking from behind, form like this. Like we have the elbow, then we have this part that slowly goes to the triceps that has the lower part, which will shade, because we're assuming, when I'm making anatomy drawings, I usually assume that something is lighted from the above, because that's usually how the things go. So the lower parts will be shaded, and we get a form like this, which is then the deltoid comes, the back part of the deltoid, and then we have this round muscle. I forgot to Google it. In my language it's called just the round muscle, but I need to, and it kind of looks like it's round, although it's a lie. It's actually a strip of tissue, but whatever. Now returning to our main hand, let's work on the shape a little bit. Yeah, we'll get to the forearm. We'll get it. The main reason I was talking about this is because I needed brachialis to go here and the brachioradialis to attach on top of it, right? So now what we have, this the muscle on the forearm can be divided into into main groups. We have on the downside of the arm, currently facing upwards, we have the flexors. They usually look like this, like balloons with a string attached to them, and they do the flexing, right? They pull the palm upwards, or they pull it inside. So what we have here is radius, and because it's radius, what we have on top of the radius, going like this, is the flexor radialis that faces the palm. Near it we have this long thin muscle called palmaris longus, and if I remember correctly, it's supposed to do the thing that we no longer can do. Basically, it's an evolutionary rudiment which is more pronounced or less pronounced depending on the person. Like, you can lack one and it's okay, if I remember correctly. Because it's something connected to climbing trees, something which we no longer do as much. Now we have the muscles inside. They go like this. It's actually one muscle, and it does the pronation. And on this part of the hand we have several going like this muscles that create this strong shape, including brachioradialis, which we already mentioned. And they create the rotational movement. They also help flex the arm, and they create this shape that goes like from thick to thin. Now what we have next is just another flexor, and these flexors are covered by the muscles on top. If we then return to talk about shape, we have the bicep going here like this. It is surrounded by brachioradialis and other muscles that are doing some flexing, and the shape looks like this. It's divided into. Then we have a little bit of shoulder bone parts sticking out. Then we have the elbow, and this is the shape that we get. And now let's add a section like this. So what we have is a rectangular shape here, caused mainly by ulnar radius, and then we have this bicep-like shape here, it divided by 2, and then we have the bicep itself. Then we have the brachialis, which is slowly covered by brachioradialis, so forming this shape here, and then we have the tricep on the back and the deltoid. So it is important to remember how to do the polygonal analysis of the form, basically make everything a polygonal net and make these sections to understand what's going on with the form. Because what I'm doing right now is actually a bit antithetic to what I'm usually doing, because while everyone says muscles and anatomy, which is very, very important, what is the most important is shape and plasticity, and it's important to remember that muscles are just shapes, that have to be shaded, and that's about it. That's all we need to know about muscles in general. And so we're quickly shading them while trying to show the volume of the form. I'm doing it in the extra, like, not good way, like I'm doing fast and dirty, but we'll probably draw more done, more like a better drawing of the arm that is rendered. Now that part where we imagine our forearm to look like this, right? A rectangular that is connected to a ovaloid, to this rounded form, and then ends like a flat piece of wood, allows us to then draw palm like another flat piece of wood, right? Which is pretty important because it's easy to forget the simplified form. This here on the below is the flexor ulnaris, so it goes, it connects to the ulna, and it is the reason why we never see our hands like this, and instead we see them like this from the below, right? This bulge is the flexor ulnaris going peeking out from below. Okay, this finger is atrocious, let's move it. So now we can make a simple palm, but we don't really need it. Let's just imply it. So we have our simplified arm. Now what's going on the other side of the hand? What is going on is the antagonist muscles, right? Because flexors are doing flexing, and the other type of movement, the extending, like the so flexing muscles from below, pushing the palm here. But muscles above need to do the opposite movement to pull the palm upwards. So we will be having the extensors muscles, and the general logic is that those are thin strip of muscle going here towards the palm, because when searching for the names of the muscle group, you'll always know that the flexors and extenders digitorum, well, digits are fingers, so basically they do the finger stuff. Then we have flexors and extensors carpalis. Those do the carpal stuff, so they pull and push here, right? And also we have some of them attached to the ulna bone. Those are called ulnaris, and I'm still not quite sure what they do. need to study it some more. Now this is the simple overview. I skipped over some muscles and I didn't go into detail. Now I suggest that we draw another arm, but fully rendered. Hmm. And for that we will need the torso, so I'm moving this team of drawings. Oh, I can't, okay. And now we will draw from the torso. Because we'll actually try to make a drawing that has two arms, which is revolutionary. So why did I start drawing arms? From a ellipse. Basically it's the neck projection point. It's very useful when drawing figure because the neck projection point allows us to instantly imagine how our rib cage is feeling, where it is, because in actuality I'll probably touch a little bit on the chest anatomy, just a little bit. If it's boring, if you notice already, then please say so. I'll try to say as little as possible about the ribcage process and the clavicles and stuff. So what we actually have here is a bone that ends like this. Well, it's not technically, it's not fully bone, but that's neither here nor there. So we have the sternum, and since the sternum faces a little bit upwards, it creates the general direction of the ribcage, which is why when we're drawing some sort of person, we can, of course we don't draw the sternum like this, we can just imply its length, where it ends, just to know where our ribcage is, which way it's facing. Now what we need next is clavicles, because those play a major role in forming, in attaching and forming the arm, the shoulder. So we have those here. And now we can imply the neck. And attach the trapezoid muscle, because why not? So we have the general form. Now we can work a little on that rib cage, making sure its proportions suit our needs. For example, for this length of clavicles I made the sternum too long. I definitely don't need so much here. And now we can imply the ribs. Again, as you probably noticed with the arm and stuff like this, I'm constantly searching with lines like this. I'm trying to make sure that I understand the volume of the form correctly, and this way of constantly searching with lines can be quite helpful. Now let's create the outline of our shoulder. And then we will go down from there and draw forearm as well. Now, one thing that is usually pretty helpful when making the pecs is this sort of movement, where we kinda just add something that looks like a cloth going like here and showing this round movement, showing the volume of the chest. This line isn't the final line, it will be a guideline, so I'm making it weaker, but I'm just making sure that the process is understood, that I usually work with guidelines like this, creating simple shapes. And while everybody absolutely loves muscles, these shapes simplifications are, in my opinion, way more important, because they make us use our understanding, our ability to construct and understand 3D form. So we have something like 3D thinking, and in order to draw, this is what we have to exercise, and that has more to do with simplified shapes. Now this is the part where I actually draw a more or less complete drawing of the torso with hands and stuff, and I'm just saying that it might be a little bit boring, because I will be speaking less and less and drawing more and more. Now, when we are drawing the shoulders, it's also useful to project one shoulder toward the other using the line of projection like this. Now I see that we have a muscle that is kinda in the way, so we'll have it move somewhere. And now when we're sketching the bicep, it can be sketched like this huge oval shape here, just not this long, something like this. Now let's add, just in case I forgot to tell, this will be like a strong person, because this way we'll be able to understand the simple shapes of the muscles. So it's usually pretty useful to start by drawing something that has, well, big muscles, though I'd advise against choosing as our models people who win bodybuilder contests, because that's a bit too much, and since bodybuilders exercise pretty much everything, both isolated and not, the general harmony of the form really depends on the program, on that bodybuilder person, and it's not always harmonious, and it's not always true to how we tend to have our muscles in life, because some muscles never get much attention in normal life, resulting in a less exaggerated shape. Now let's make a simple shape of the forearm, just a silhouette. The main principle here is like this, so the line goes here and then it goes here. No, this angle, I don't like this angle, let's change it. Let's make something more normal. And so we have the silhouette of our arm. Now we can use we make one line go inside the other line, creating this visible insertion of one volume into the other, which is like, it's a dirty trick that always works, because we can draw like this, right? Or we can draw like this, and the second method will instantly create volume, while this one will just create a flat surface. And it's important to know that line can create volumes as well, even without shading and stuff, and to use it accordingly. Again, you probably already know it, but just in case, I'm not really aware of the scope of your knowledge, so I'm talking about pretty much everything. Now let's, since our biceps end here and the elbow is here but we can see it, our hand will be somewhere here, and now we can draw it. Again, first we start with a simple shape. So we have the rectangular shape that is done. Of course, we already can start implying the muscles like this, but we got to be careful with adding muscles in order to not forget the general harmony of the form. So this here is brachioradialis. It goes like this. Between the bicep and tricep we have the upper part of the shoulder muscles, the brachialis, and we have the tendons stretching from the tricep, and then we have the invisible shoulder here. Now let's change the sizes of these forms, and already I'm starting to treat them like volumes, like simple forms, because that's what they are. And now we need to create the lower part of the bicep, and again, this isn't about some anatomical part, this is just about planes and the form, because again, the part of the biceps that actually flexes is this part. This and this part act too close to its attachment point, so they don't really work, and this causes this decline and this decline of the genital shape, which results in the fact that this thing faces away from the light, and this part probably faces toward the light. Once again depicting the volume and the volume. Now we add a simple hand. Now when we draw the deltoid, it's usually pretty useful to remember that this part is declining. It will be shaded a little bit, so let's show it as the downward part. This is the part where the bone is hidden, and we can also imagine that every part of the deltoid is divided into planes like this. So we have the different sides, and we can show them by shading different parts. So we have something like this. And I attach to the clavicle here. This is the trapezoid. So now what we have here is the upper pectorals, and the upper we go this inner there, so we have this little dent in the form here between the shoulder and the pecs. Of course, this will be just a cursory glance into the pectorals. We don't need them right now. We don't need too much of them. I mean, we don't need to discuss it in detail. And now let's sketch the second arm. This one will be facing, like he'll have it on his like basically when the person stands like this. So we'll need to move it a little bit until it works. And of course we're making the lines of the bicep enter the form and quickly depict the form of the bicep. Now we're having our deltoid and we can show our tricep. And then we can show the brachioradialis like this. One part. And we have our hand, except it's a bit small, so let's extend it. Now, because his arm is like this, the shoulder is directed here, and we see here the upper part and the divide between the upper part, the upper plane, and the frontal plane, which can be imagined as this shape that looks like a square. And now these parts can be usually imagined like pieces of garlic. And we have three main pieces, right? The frontal, the middle, and the back one, which attached to the middle of the scapula. Now let's draw the clavicle, attach it to the acromion, and have our shoulder mostly formed. Now we have a piece of pectoral muscle going down under the deltoids, and let's make it bigger, by the way. And we can imply the volume by using lines that divide the planes of the form. Here we can try to show the different parts of the pectoral muscle, and when doing something like that, it's important to search for a good shape. For a well-designed shape, I mean. So the main point of this entire lecture is that hands, especially forearms, have a lot of muscles, right? But the volume these muscles have is different. For example, the flexors and extensors are mostly buried below, unless you are, I don't know, climbing. If you are climbing and your arms are engaged, they are working, we will see different strengths of different extensors and flexors. But otherwise, we will see the main shape of muscles here, here, and the arm muscles. But on the lower part of the forearm, the main form will be created by the mostly bones. Now let's draw the hand. Here I draw two fingers like as if it was one finger, because it's a pretty useful trick that saves a bit time, and then we could carve them out of the shape if we so needed. And here's the thumb. Now it's important to remember that this part where the little finger is, the part where the ulna attaches, it can be forming a little bulge, or rather, it's not like it can be, it always forms a bulge here, which is why when we are looking at the arm, at the hand from the side of the pinky, we'll see it like this, right? This is the ulnar attachment point. But when we are drawing it from above, mainly, we don't see much of the bulge, and it doesn't influence the silhouette too much. So we have one hand. Let's return to the other. And in this hand we'll connect 3 fingers together like this, creating a sort of a block. Wait a second, I need to free the cat. Now let's continue. Now a useful tip about proportions of the hand is that midpoint of the palm is the point where the metacarpal bone of the thumb ends. So this is the first phalange, starts here, and the second. Again, as always, mainly working with simple shapes, first and foremost. Complicated shapes can be added later by dividing, like subdividing, these simple ones. Okay, this hand is a little bit big, got carried away. Let's make it a little bit smaller. Now let's add a little bit of tonal accent here to make the stronger tone on the division between the shape facing upwards and the shape facing sideways. So yeah, this is mainly it. So now I will just be cleaning up and finishing the image. Now let's move all this junk. Maybe even erase some of it. Just trying to make it look well compositionally. And now that it's big, we can add a little bit of detail. Oh. Well, that's it, I think. If you have any questions of or anything you'd like me to do different next time, please write them down. And thank you for watching. Bye everyone.